Good evening.
Imagine stepping into a vibrant London classroom in late 1977, where students from around the world gather with notebooks open, hopeful faces lit by the midday sun. Their accents pour into the room. Some gently roll like distant waves, others are staccato like raindrops on cobblestones. For many viewers back then, that scene felt innocent, even charming. But beneath the laughter and the rapid-fire jokes, something darker simmered. By the time production wrapped on Mind Your Language's first season, the show had already crossed lines that its creators will tell you they never intended to approach. Today we pull back the curtain on the details they hoped you'd overlook. The erased episodes, the botched accents, the missing tapes, and the unapologetic decisions made in dimly lit boardrooms focused on ratings rather than reality. So take a look. These are the secrets they didn't want you to spot in Mind Your Language, and we're just getting started. When writer Vince Powell first pitched the show, his vision was a compassionate portrayal of an English teacher guiding immigrants toward real-world goals. He saw individuals, not caricatures, with dreams so vivid you could almost taste them. Yet on that decisive pitch day with network executive Michael Grade, one question overshadowed everything else. How many eyeballs can this bring to the screen? Sparks of idealism were swiftly doused by the cold calculation of projected ratings. The result was a classroom full of living clichés where culture became costume and genuine accents morphed into exaggerated punchlines. We'll explore exactly how and why this shift happened, and why the surviving footage tells just half the story. Rolling into the pilot, Lost to History, is a version of the show so subtle and authentic that test audiences labeled it boring. Imagine a scene where a serious culinary student named Giovanni shares a heartfelt detail about saving money for his own restaurant, delivered in a real Italian accent, studied from dialect coaches who insisted on accuracy. That sequence would have laid the groundwork for moments of laughter and empathy. But according to archived memos, it was scrapped within days. Instead, we got Giovanni Vincenzo Marco Dino Alberto Leonardo yelling through a caricatured accent as he tripped over every word. The original master tapes, destroyed after creditors seized them in liquidation, held precious glimpses of the pilot that could have been. That's the first secret they wouldn't want you to spot. The real Mind Your Language never saw daylight. Next, let's consider casting. You probably assumed each actor was carefully chosen to match their character's background. Not quite. Of the dozen main students, only 2 shared their real nationality. The bulk were local actors coached to mimic accents so thick you could slice through them. A Chinese-born actor pretended to be Japanese. A Turkish-born performer gave us a Greek chef. Their scripts demanded they adopt personas that blended nationalities into one giant punchline. At least 6 dialect coaches were hired to sculpt these accents, often spending hours convincing actors to dial their voices into unnatural extremes. That expense, over time, accounted for more than 20% of the per-episode budget. Yet those coaches later admitted in private interviews that their work went beyond teaching. They were conditioning actors to amplify stereotypes for laughs. Now contrast that with the show's public claim of celebrating cultural diversity, and you begin to see how easily truth and marketing diverged. Behind the scenes, tempers flared. Barry Evans, the beloved lead who played Mr. Jeremy Brown, confided to directors that the humor sometimes crossed painful boundaries. He refused to deliver lines that felt hateful or demeaning. Those reshoots led to frantic editing, continuity errors, and even on-the-fly rewrites taped live before the audience. And those audience reactions? They were real, recorded within the studio walls. But did you spot the canned laughter buried under genuine applause? Producers mixed live and pre-recorded tracks to amplify every chuckle and disguise awkward silences. When a joke landed poorly, they simply drowned it in more applause, training viewers at home to laugh whether they genuinely found it funny or not. Then there's the lost 4th season, 13 episodes recorded at a cheap college campus in 1985. By then, the show's reputation for edgy comedy bordered on infamy. Only one episode survives today, known as Episode 14, restored from an old VHS copy. The others vanished when creditors seized the studio's assets. Rumors persist that those missing scripts pushed stereotypes so far that even the most jaded executives balked. Production notes from that era, recently uncovered in a private archive, describe scenes involving fictional rituals and off-screen audio clips that were never meant for public ears. Historians argue these episodes were the show's most controversial chapter, and yet they've been scrubbed from every streaming platform and DVD box set. Try to find them, and you'll hit blank clips or not available messages, a perfect illustration of how powerful figures can manipulate collective memory. As our journey unfolds, you'll see how marketing taglines promised harmless fun, while internal memos warned of potential liability. We found a note from an early advertiser, a multinational soap brand, quietly requesting removal of specific jokes after receiving consumer feedback. Yet airtight contracts guaranteed the network no responsibility once filming wrapped, leaving offended viewers with no recourse. Contrast that with today's streaming era, where user complaints can trigger instant removals and public apologies. The way Mind Your Language navigated that boundary in the 1970s reveals a lot about evolving standards in television ethics. Perhaps you've wondered why the show's theme song, a jaunty piano riff with a sprightly whistle, never hinted at the underlying tensions. That melody was chosen to evoke childlike wonder and deflect criticism. But composers recall that the producer insisted on cutting any minor chord that sounded ominous. The result was a soundtrack palette that disarmed viewers, nudging them to see the show as harmless learning fun rather than a breeding ground for mockery. That cunning choice effectively masked the show's more troubling undercurrents, ensuring few spotted the tonal dissonance between catchy theme and controversial content. Another reveal comes from the series' merchandise boom. Did you know that at least 3 tie-in phrasebooks were printed, each featuring Learn with Laughter taglines? Those books taught real English phrases, but juxtaposed them with cartoonish illustrations borrowed from the show's comic cuts. One phrasebook even recommended practicing dialogues by imitating character voices, inadvertently training readers in stereotyped accent mimicry. Educators rejected them en masse, but the phrasebooks still circulated in schoolyards and gift shops, quietly perpetuating the very biases television tried to mine for laughs. And what about the fan letters? Archive boxes in a forgotten corner of ITV's old HQ revealed thousands of letters sent by children struggling to learn English. Many asked genuine questions, hopeful for help. But network replies were standardized, directing writers to buy expensive workbooks or tune in weekly for half an hour of educational comedy. Those workbook sales soared despite teachers warning that fictionalized errors could derail real learning. Contrast the show's promise of education with its reliance on fictional mistakes, and you have a paradox no viewer at the time realized they were part of. Finally, close observers will notice the series' framing of humor around the classroom door. Early drafts had instructors entering through a plain wood door numbered Class 3A. Later episodes featured a brightly painted door with a half-globe etched into the window, symbolizing a global melting pot. But careful timing of shots ensured that the globe was only fully visible when dialogue poked fun at a student's homeland. That is your silent cue, a visual pun reinforcing otherness. We'll break down that technique in exact frame-by-frame detail in the next segment, showing you the subtle cues designed to shape audience perception. As the globe door trick demonstrates, Mind Your Language employed visual cues to signal otherness without uttering a single word. From the moment the classroom door with its half-globe design glided open, you were primed to see each student as other, while the teacher stepped forward as the natural guide. Camera angles reinforced that hierarchy by keeping Mr. Brown in broad, even light while his students lingered in partial shadow. That contrast made him authoritative and them peripheral, a subtle invitation to judge every accented syllable. Costume choices followed suit. Bright, saturated hues on student outfits set them apart from the muted earth tones of the teacher's wardrobe. The effect was a silent narrative about belonging, painted frame by frame to prepare viewers for the laughter ahead. Look closer at the lighting shifts within scenes. In one episode, a spotlight unintentionally slips to illuminate the Chinese student's traditional scarf, making it glow against the darkened background. That burst of brightness draws your eye before the punchline even lands, cueing you to focus on his exotic identity first. Between takes, the gaffer would reposition lamps to maximize these moments, ensuring the next cut accentuated difference rather than humanity. It was a low-cost upgrade that delivered high-impact messaging, familiarity for the teacher, novelty for the class, a dichotomy that ran deeper than any verbal gag. Sound design worked hand-in-glove with visuals to guide your reactions. Mr. Brown's voice occupies the center of the stereo field, while student responses are panned left or right, distancing them in the listener's mind. Later, canned laughter tracks were layered on top of studio applause to mask any awkward silences or misdelivered lines. Producers edited out rough takes, stitching in a chorus of chuckles that never existed in real time. As a result, every joke, however stereotypical, felt earned, because you heard a room full of people laughing, even if none of it was genuine. That artifice is easiest to spot when you pause an episode and follow the waveform. Notice how the laugh peaks don't align with the actor's mouth moving. Even the blackboard became a tool of subtle messaging. The crew used colored chalk to flag scenes, green for vocabulary, white for punchlines about cultural confusion. Those color shifts trained viewers' eyes to anticipate laughs. In one filmed but unaired sequence, a student quietly writes an earnest question on the board in purple chalk, an experiment with tone that never made it past test screening. The network deemed it too low energy and spliced over the footage with a rapid cut to a comic reaction shot. That missing scene underlines the show's priority: cultivate instant amusement, not authentic exploration. Beyond production tricks, the sponsor integrations reveal another layer of control. Mind Your Language was financed in part by Kleenex soap commercials, which interrupted the class scenes with shots of Mr. Brown at a sink, scrubbing hands under a tap. Those breaks branded British propriety as clean and orderly, implicitly contrasting it with the chaotic accents and gestures of the foreign students. Advertisements ended with a quick on-screen logo and a jingle nearly identical to the show's theme, blurring the line between program content and promotional messaging. Viewers at home absorbed that seamless mix without realizing their sympathies were being influenced by corporate interests. Global distribution amplified the problem. The series sold to more than 30 countries, but broadcasters routinely edited or dubbed segments they anticipated would offend local audiences. In India, for example, they muted any references to turbaned Sikhs and replaced them with generic classroom confusion jokes. In Africa, certain episodes were banned outright. That localized sanitization effectively erased the show's context, transforming it into a patchwork of comedic misfires. What remained on screens across continents was an even more distorted caricature, one shaped by multiple filters of prejudice rather than the creator's original script. Yet perhaps the most telling secret lies hidden in the archives. In 2019, a private collector leaked a minor key version of the theme tune arranged with minor chords and dissonant strings, an ominous motif that producers rejected as too unsettling. Had that soundtrack been used, viewers might have experienced a subtle tension underlying every joke. Instead, they got a whistled melody guaranteed to lull any critical thought and frame the show as harmless fun. That choice masked the fact that every decision from joke selection to camera angle was optimized for emotional control. These hidden layers were exactly what the creators feared you'd dissect decades later with high-definition streaming and frame-by-frame analysis. So the next time someone dismisses Mind Your Language as just harmless retro comedy, point them toward the invisible levers that shaped your viewing experience. With a few clicks, you can pause an episode, zoom in on a costume scene, or isolate a laugh track to see the artifice laid bare. These revelations prove that no piece of media exists in a vacuum. Every scene is a negotiation between creative ambition, commercial pressure, and cultural assumption. Beyond the technical sleight of hand and the canned laughter, the show's most dangerous secrets lie in the personal stories it buried. When production ended each day, actors walked off set carrying more than their lines. Their behind-the-scenes frustrations were recorded in memos and private correspondence tucked away in dusty filing cabinets. In those pages you find pleas from writers begging to restore nuance, and notes from directors apologizing for forced punchlines. The laughter we heard was only half the soundtrack. The other half was heartbreak, silences of regret, and the weight of what they had signed up to portray. Consider Barry Evans, whose portrayal of Mr. Jeremy Brown made him a household name. Few knew he carried guilt after witnessing stereotypes he helped broadcast. Colleagues remember him staring at scripts late into the night, questioning every line he'd agreed to deliver. Personal letters uncovered after his death reveal he felt trapped by typecasting, unable to escape the buffoonish teacher role. Secretly bisexual and forbidden from sharing his truth on a primetime sitcom, Barry's internal battle intensified behind a mask of jovial authority. His final interviews hinted a relief when the show went off air, freedom tinged with sorrow. Other cast members carried scars of their own. Albert Moses, who played Ranjit Singh, lamented that the constant sermons in stereotypical cadences overshadowed his broader talents. Jamila Masahe, cast as the Indian housewife, recounted how producers cut scenes where her character voiced genuine concerns about family and finance. She survived only because her authenticity was assumed to connect with South Asian audiences abroad. Actors like Ricardo Montalban and Pixin Lim later reflected that repeated caricature forced them to unlearn their natural voices. In private gatherings, they described language coaches who prided themselves on teaching the funny-foot wrong style rather than true pronunciation. In the writer's room of London Weekend Television, tempers flared as the creative team clashed over each gag. Vince Powell pushed to retain some emotional depth, sending memos that pleaded for authentic dialogue. Meanwhile, network executives demanded bigger jabs that tested stereotypes to the limit. Scripts underwent at least 3 major rewrites every week, fueled by focus group results warning that weak accents don't rate. One surviving draft instructs the Sikh and Pakistani characters to bicker over turban versus patka for an entire scene, an exchange that never reached air but sparked heated debates among the staff. Those off-air battles set the tone for a show that thrived on scripted prejudice. Formal complaints added another layer to this fraught environment. The Commission for Racial Equality filed objections after the Christmas special, and advertisers quietly threatened to shift budgets when complaints spiked. Internal letters show that Kleenex soap chipped in an anonymous note requesting removal of a gag about students scrubbing under their fingernails, what they deemed distasteful. The network responded with a public promise to review content standards, then quietly removed offending scenes from reruns without acknowledgement. Those silent edits speak volumes. The show's backers wielded power far beyond any laugh track, reshaping the narrative while keeping their involvement hidden. The infamous Christmas special, What's in a Name, stands as a stark case study. That episode featured a class debate about Sikh and Muslim identities that escalated into a volatile argument, with Ali Nadam's insult about turbaned honor and Ranjit Singh's retort referencing partition violence. ITV received over 300 complaints within hours. The scene was permanently excised from all future airings. A handful of international broadcasters dubbed over it while most replaced the segment entirely. On surviving script pages, that scene was marked too incendiary, an understatement that understated nothing. Today, only a few faded transcripts hint at the raw tension once broadcast live. Rumors swirl about what the lost fourth season contained. Scholar Dr. Sarita Malik uncovered fragments suggesting secret rituals filmed in an unheated college hall, complete with off-camera commentary about celebratory chants poking fun at cultural ceremonies. Researchers claim audio cassettes survived just long enough to confirm scenes that parodied religious rites then disappeared without a trace. One leaked production note warns that Episode 7 featured a mock initiation requiring students to speak gibberish while blindfolded, a sketch allegedly shelved after even test audiences walked out. These tantalizing scraps highlight a show that kept raising the bar for controversy until it burned itself out. Contrast that sensational chaos with today's streaming era, where fans can freeze frames, mute the track, and slow down audio to catch every nuance. Selective cuts are easier to detect, and restoration projects sometimes reunite lost footage with newly discovered reels. Still, major platforms quietly remove entire episodes from their libraries to avoid fresh backlash. So while archivists may piece together clips from broken tapes and private collections, mainstream viewers only ever see an incomplete, sanitized version. It's a digital cat-and-mouse game. As we unearth hidden layers, the gatekeepers scramble to obscure them once more. These personal stories and behind-the-scenes battles reveal why Mind Your Language remains a complex cultural artifact. It wasn't just a sitcom, it was a collision of creative ambition, corporate agendas, and evolving social boundaries. Audiences at the time laughed at caricatures without questioning the long-term damage inflicted on real communities. Today, the show prompts us to ask not only what we watch, but how and why. In the next section, we'll dissect the linguistic errors themselves, those fake mistakes that scholars identified, and see how myths about language learning were woven into every punchline. Now we turn to the language lab they built, an entire comedic ecosystem fueled by errors that never occurred in real classrooms. Scholars analyzing hundreds of scenes cataloged 27 unique types of fake mistakes, each engineered to land a punchline rather than reflect genuine second language acquisition. From invented phoneme swaps to impossible vocabulary confusions, every scripted slip-up was optimized for maximum amusement. The result? A show that taught viewers to expect foreign learners to stumble in ways no one actually does, and to laugh when they did. To map these inventions, linguists at 3 universities painstakingly transcribed dialogue from every surviving episode. They identified 69 distinct moments where characters made errors outside known learning patterns. In one comprehensive study, each utterance was cross-referenced against established ESL corpora databases, showing how learners progress through stages from basic utterances to complex sentences. The verdict was unanimous. More than 80% of the mistakes were pure fiction, concocted for the camera. First came phonological jokes like the infamous Chinese RL swap. In real Mandarin, such confusions rarely occur at advanced levels. Yet the show relied on this trope in over 50 scenes. Characters regularly mangled R sounds into L or vice versa, even in context where native Mandarin speakers would articulate them correctly. This repeated gag became shorthand for funny foreigner voice, overshadowing any authentic learning moments that might have shown true progress. Next, the writers introduced lexical absurdities. Spanish-speaking students mixed up feet, fate, and fet in one breath, an error pattern unsupported by linguistic research. English teachers explain that Spanish learners rarely confuse vowel sounds so arbitrarily, because their distinct vowel inventory aligns more closely with English. Yet the show's script insisted on this misstep, presumably because the comic trio of similar-sounding words created a rapid-fire routine that test audiences found amusingly chaotic. Then there were syntactic stunts. Students strutted through sentences packed with impossible word orders, putting adjectives before nouns in languages where that never happens, or linking clauses with awkward conjunctions. These fabrications ignored the fact that ESL learners often follow predictable syntactic patterns influenced by their native tongues. Instead, each unnatural sentence was a theatrical prop, designed to punctuate a laugh track rather than portray incremental learning. Writers also engineered mixed category errors, part pronunciation jape, part grammatical mishmash. In one notorious sequence, a character combined memory loss vocabulary with an invented idiom, "I've forgotten my cognition," creating nonsense that no real learner would utter. These hybrid gags surfaced in almost every episode, cementing the show's reputation for linguistic lunacy. The audience never questioned whether any student anywhere had ever made such a bizarre conflation. Why did these fabrications matter? Real-world consequences surfaced almost immediately. ESL instructors reported that learners internalized the show's myths, expecting their own mistakes to mirror these absurd tropes. One survey found that 33% of international students felt they had to simplify speech or avoid classroom participation to escape ridicule. Instructors complained that their credibility suffered when students referenced the show's errors as benchmarks for their own progress. Teachers also saw classroom dynamics shift. Comments like "don't talk like that" echoed the laughter studio audiences once provided. Educators noted a 20% drop in student confidence in mixed language settings. Learners were hesitant to speak up, fearing they'd resemble caricatures by the end of every anecdote. The show's caricatured learning trajectory overshadowed genuine milestones, making real improvement feel anticlimactic by comparison. Critically, professional associations weighed in. The largest teacher union issued a position paper condemning the program's pseudo-linguistics as damaging to learners' self-esteem and to public perceptions of multicultural classrooms. That document cited 50 cases where sponsor-funded phrasebooks, branded with show cartoons, taught students to mimic these false errors. The catchphrase "Learn English the Fun Way" became, ironically, the catalyst for widespread confusion about authentic acquisition processes. Today, modern educators use these distorted lessons as case studies in media literacy. University courses on sociolinguistics include side-by-side comparisons of show transcripts and authentic learner corpora, prompting students to spot each invented error and analyze its comedic function. These classroom exercises underscore a vital principle: language is a process, not a punchline. By dissecting the show's fabrications, teachers help learners reclaim their progress and resist reductive stereotypes. Meanwhile, streaming platforms quietly rearrange or omit the most egregious linguistic gags. Some services remove episodes with extreme misrepresentations. Others slap warnings atop the player, advising viewers that certain comedic elements may not reflect real language learning. This digital-era intervention underscores how standards have shifted. What passed as harmless decades ago now triggers content advisories before a single line is spoken. As we've seen, Mind Your Language built its entire comedic architecture on a foundation of made-up mistakes. Those fabrications shaped viewers' expectations, misled learners, and reinforced reductive narratives about accents and proficiency. By spotlighting authentic research alongside each punchline, today's educators and media critics can dismantle the show's linguistic illusions, one deconstructed gag at a time. In our final section, we'll explore the broader cultural reckoning that followed, tracing how worldwide backlash, academic audits, and modern streaming policies converged to redefine what we accept as educational entertainment. In the decades that followed Mind Your Language's original run, a seismic shift occurred in how societies evaluate media that straddles entertainment and education. As archival scholars revisited vintage programming, they unearthed a trove of production memos, correspondence, and international license agreements that charted a global backlash beginning in the early 1980s. Formal condemnations from educational associations joined complaints from civil rights groups, and even some original broadcasters quietly admitted that their eagerness for syndication revenue had overridden any sense of cultural responsibility. This reckoning unfolded in three overlapping waves: activist critique, academic audit, and platform reform. First came the activist wave. Grassroots organizations formed coalitions to pressure networks to stop airing episodes deemed cultural harm, and they circulated petitions demanding public apologies. In the UK, a campaign dubbed Laugh Without Prejudice targeted ITV and LWT, calling for live discussions between affected communities and network executives. Protest letters poured into newspapers, and televised roundtables began scrutinizing every laugh track, asking whether comedy should ever rely on denigrating entire ethnic groups. By the mid-1980s, Some regional stations opted to replace Mind Your Language with locally produced cartoons, citing audience sensitivity. Concurrent with these protests, academic audits emerged. Interdisciplinary teams in linguistics, sociology, and media studies collaborated on peer-reviewed reports documenting the show's long-term impact on learners' self-esteem and on public perceptions of immigrants. One landmark study tracked immigrant student performance in ESL classes before and after the show's broadcast, revealing a measurable decline in classroom participation and an increase in anxiety-related symptoms. Universities hosted symposiums where keynote speakers re-examined archival footage, dissecting joke structures frame by frame and revealing the systemic biases built into every scene. These conferences produced edited volumes, some spanning over 500 pages, cataloging the mechanisms of stereotype propagation and urging media literacy as a core curriculum element.